Okay, and I think we are now recording according to the Google Meet here. So our speaker today is Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins. She is the founder of the Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Transformation, which has acronyms WCAPS. Was ambassador at the U.S. Department of State from 2009 to 2017 as the coordinator for threat reduction programs for the Bureau of International Security and Nonproliferation, where she coordinated the Department of State's Weapons of Mass Destruction terrorism program. And I'm going to assume this is an anti-terrorism program as opposed to a terrorism program. But
yes. Good assumption.
Yes. So thank you for coming today and talking to us. So we first met at a Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists event, if I remember correctly, where you were talking about these same issues back then. Clearly, that's something of great importance to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. And so the first question that I got from the students are, what are weapons of mass destruction?
What is weapons of mass destruction?
Yes. Can you describe what weapons of mass destruction are to somebody who has no idea?
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. I look forward to having our conversation. My internet was a little wobbly there, so if for some reason you lose me, I'm coming right back. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. Looks pretty good so far.
Yeah. Okay. So, what is weapons of mass destruction? Well, weapons of mass destruction are traditionally nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, and biological weapons. And the reason why these three have been singled out is because of the mass loss of life that can happen if you use those type of weapons. And the massive loss of life very quickly. And so that's why they got the title of weapons of mass destruction.
Okay. Yeah. And you worked specifically in the area of nonproliferation. So the next question that was submitted is, what is nonproliferation?
Nonproliferation is pretty much what it sounds like. It's the effort to try to ensure that we limit how many countries actually acquire weapons of mass destruction. So it's all the programs and all the activities that we do, and here I say we, I mean the U.S. and other countries are engaged in to make sure these weapons do not proliferate, they do not multiply, and that more countries don't get them.
And how do you go about doing this? How do you accomplish nonproliferation?
There is an entire nonproliferation regime, and there is no one thing. It goes from everything to actual treaties and conventions to other types of multilateral agreements that may not be treaties, to just diplomacy. There's a lot of diplomatic efforts that go on between countries to discuss issues of weapons of mass destruction. It really is a number of things that go on. There's what they call export control regimes, which are efforts to make sure that countries don't acquire the kind of things that they need to build these kind of weapons. There's things like nuclear security, which is used to ensure that the material that's used to make a nuclear weapon are secure so that non-state actors can get their hands on them and maybe give them to somebody else. And so even though traditionally nonproliferation is really focused on states and making sure states don't get them, we also concern ourselves in making sure that non-state actors don't get them as well. Either way, they can proliferate.
So how many non-state actors, which I assume that's code for terrorist groups, have weapons of mass destruction?
How many have
acquired weapons of mass destruction?
Well, I can't say offhand. It's not. Well, I guess there's two ways of looking at it. When you're looking at chemical, biological, nuclear weapons, Um, you can say, for example, what's happened in Syria. Um, if it's not, if it's a non-state actor that's doing it, right, which there's been debate about it, then that's obviously an issue of a non-state actor getting their hands on it. There have been instances um, of nuclear trafficking that have been discovered or uncovered, usually by international entities, or countries may find them. So there have been cases of, let's say, nuclear material getting loose, um, but they're not. But they're not. The number is not. It's not like it happens every day. You know, it's not like that. But they do happen. It does happen. And the important thing is that you don't want it to happen at all, because you don't want anyone to get, any country that shouldn't have it, or any person to get their hands on what they can use to make weapons of mass destruction. Now, there's differences. I must say that for nuclear weapons, you need to have two things to make a nuclear weapon. You need to have highly enriched uranium or plutonium. But if you talk about a biological weapon, that's a little more challenging, and also chemical, because those are dual use, which means the same things that can be used to make a bioweapon can be used for um, for other purposes, you know, that are not evil. So it can be very challenging in some situations more than others, depending on the type of weapon you're talking about.
Great. Yeah, the only one I can really think of was the attack in Japan. I think it was sarin.
Amshirikyo.
Yeah, that's really the only non-state actor that I can really think of, excepting Syria, if that was really a non-state actor.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it depends on what you want to. I mean, there's been instances, for example, of people, you know, putting things in food, you know, and creating salmonella on purpose. I mean, that was more like it's not like it was a huge effect, but there are cases of things like that that have happened on a much smaller scale.
Yeah, that's a good point. There was also the what was that? Right after 9/11, there was the spores sent to DC, if I remember correctly. I don't remember what, but that was more of a biological weapon.
Yeah, I lost you for a second there when you were talking. You were talking.
Oh, I said right after 9/11, there was a biological.
Oh, the anthrax attacks. Yes.
The anthrax.
Exactly.
Attack, yeah.
Yes.
And so that one went through the Postal Service, and if I remember, got people
Been on the Hill. Yeah.
Florida, DC,
right.
And okay. So I guess there are a few of these that do happen. Yeah, it is kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah. And if anyone's interested in that, you could just kind of do some research on that if you wanted to get more information on how many times things have happened. I mean, some of it's not in open source, but a lot of it is. So if any of your folks wanted to learn more about that, they can.
Okay, thank you. So this is kind of related to the same question. CBRN, which stands for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons. How commonly are they used?
How often are they used?
Just covered by non-state actors. How often do state actors use them?
Not too often. Obviously, the U.S. used it. Nuclear weapon. Hello?
Yeah, we lost you there.
Hello?
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we've lost you. Can anybody out there hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Jeff.
Okay,
yeah, no problems here at all.
Yeah.
No
All
problem.
right. Good. It's remote. This happens. The joys of Zooming. hopefully we can get her back.
Yeah.
If it's like the problems I was having last week after a lightning strike, she'll just have to turn off her Wi-Fi and turn it back on. She should be able to get back, but
Yeah, she said she was having some trouble with her internet at the start. So it was probably at her end.
I don't think it's the internet. I think you were grilling her too hard, Jeff.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah, the great thing is really none of these are my questions. Oh, do you have a question up there? No? I thought somebody popped in and
No, I was fixing my hair.
yeah, gotcha. Uh-oh. Let's see if she's trying to email me.
She's back.
Oh, very good. Oh, she's muted though. You're muted.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Perfect. I hear
Can
you
you now?
now. Great. Yes.
I don't know what's going on.
No, it's I have an incredible ability to break the internet. This happened with me on campus last week, where I had to go run room to room carrying the laptop to find a spot where it works. So we were back on the question on CBRN weapons. How commonly are they used?
Yeah. So
Yep.
you can hear me? Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going while we can. So we know about the nuclear use. We talked a little bit about bio, right?
So nuclear, just to be clear, has only been used either one time or twice, depending on how you want to do that accounting, at least in anger. And so chemical were very commonly used in World War I, right?
Yes, used in World War I, used even before World War I, but certainly used in World War I, and that's when the community really woke up about weapons of mass destruction, really. And ever since then, of course, we had the Chemical Weapons Convention from the 90s. There was use, of course, in Iran-Iraq war. So there's been other instances of chemical weapons use, not a ton, but there has been use of it. And then of course you had Syria recently, where you had that. Biological weapons, interestingly, biological weapons could date way back to the Middle Ages when people were using infected cows or things to infect troops or things like that. So there's a long history of biological weapons, depending on, like you say, how you use
smallpox blankets.
Yeah. But it was used as a weapon, so it can count. So it was used for many, many, many years. And we have the Biological Weapons Convention now. That was from 1975. That's been around since then. We've had these uses with Russia recently, what's going on with Russia and poisoning people like in the UK. And then one recently, we talked a little bit about the use of anthrax. We talked about Antirriccio. And so we have had some cases of biological weapons, biological pathogens being used. All radiological, not considered a weapon of mass destruction, but it can cause a lot of harm, depending on how it's used. As radiological sources are pretty much everywhere, as you know, in hospitals, universities, many places. Many people are more concerned about radiological than nuclear because of the fact that radiological sources are every place, but the amount of damage is certainly not the same. But we have been including that, as you said, CBRN, we have been including that now in more and more discussions about things we need to be worried about and to protect ourselves against.
Yeah, I think radiological weapons are more of a fear weapon because realistically, you're not going to have the mass casualty events that you could have with other
Yeah.
with the
And the
other
thing is,
cases.
like Shinrikyo, dabbled in both bio and chem. So I mean, there are non-state actors who dabble in both because they know that nuclear is obviously not easy to get to do. You need those two materials to get it. But for bio and chem, it's a little easier because you can, those are dual use. So they've done both. I mean, they play with both. Yeah.
So you've mentioned dual use a couple of times here. Dual use can cover a very wide range of materials. I mean, technically, computers could be used for weapons manufacturing and clearly for non-weapons. How does one go about identifying something as a dual use material or dual use item?
Yeah, the basic definitions, as you said, is dual use if it can have two purposes. So when we're talking about bioweapons, that's the clearest case because you have scientists working in a lab, and some of the things that they're using is pathogens who, for example, make a vaccine can also be used for so you can use it for a weapon. Seems to be an echo here.
Yeah,
I don't know
I'm
where that's
picking it
coming
up too.
Yeah. Um, so so really it's just a way in which you can use something that causes to it's not anything special, it's just the fact that it can be used for more than one purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
This may be a tough question.
Okay.
Police in the U.S. have been using tear gas and pepper spray against protesters for crowd control. Do either of these qualify as use of chemical weapons?
Well, that's been an issue with the Chemical Weapons Convention where the United States has basically said that we can use those types of chemicals for riot cases. That was an issue that came up when we were ratifying the Chemical Weapons Convention, and we did carve that out for use.
Is that a
And
carve out just for the U.S. or can other
I,
countries?
that's I don't think I don't I know we did. I don't necessarily think it's just the U.S. that has carved that out. I would be surprised if we are the only ones that has carved that out. But interestingly, because of what's been happening, that question has come up again. I've seen that question come up recently because of the way it's been used, and so people are starting to now wonder: should we be regulating that more? Should we be limiting that more in a legal sense? And then certainly there's the Chemical Weapons Convention where we've made the carve out, but still domestically we could do things regardless of the CWC.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, you can always do something domestically. Okay. So, what is a nuclear deterrent?
A nuclear deterrent is something that is a thing, I'll just say the word thing, or an action or a threat that will cause a country that has nuclear weapons from actually using it. It deters one from using it. It makes one with a nuclear weapon think much more carefully about whether they're actually going to use a weapon. So,
And so, is nuclear deterrence an effective policy? Does it work?
It has been. It has been. At least that's has been our thought process for many years. Is that we do things in the U.S. because we think it's going to deter other countries from using a weapon. So we may do things in the U.S. because we think it will deter Russia from using a nuclear weapon on us. And same with Russia. And so countries who have a nuclear weapon or wants to threaten a country with a nuclear weapon will take certain actions or make certain proclamations to deter that country from actually using it.
What countries have a stockpile big enough to be a deterrent?
Well, obviously the U.S. and Russia. We've been using this idea of nuclear deterrence to prevent either country from wanting to actually be the first one to use a nuclear weapon. You can say that India and Pakistan have their own kind of neutral deterrent situation because they have weapons. And so, any country that, I mean, we don't have a lot of countries that have them, but for countries that have them, others are going to want to find ways to prevent them from using them. And it's not easy to do. You usually have to have a weapon yourself to prevent that, or to create a sense of they should not do that. But you also have regimes, and you have regimes that are theoretically done so that it could deter the U.S. from using it. For example, you have these things called these weapons-free zones, where these zones where the U.S. agrees that it will not use a nuclear weapon in that area, particularly, because no one in that area has one. That's kind of a nuclear deterrent because we've agreed that we're not going to do it. So it's created the same effect.
And how many of those areas are there?
There's quite a few. I mean, I think if I tried to name them all, I would forget one. But there's like the Treaty of Tlatelolco, which was the first one ever done. That's in Latin America. There's one in Southeast Asia. There's one in I'm forgetting it. There's one in Africa. There's one. I think there's like 5. There is not. I can tell you there isn't one. There is not one. Obviously, North America doesn't have one. There is not one in Northeast Asia, and there is not one in the Middle East.
Yeah, interesting. So we can nuke Canada then. Yeah, I would have thought North America would have had one. Are these all recent developments, or?
No, these have been going. I mean, like I said, the Tlatelolco Treaty is old. I mean, I can't remember exactly when, but I think it's in the 70s. If I had to, off the top of my head, without googling it, they've been around for a while. I mean, some of them have been a little more recent, relatively speaking, in the last 15 years or so. But we have a lot of the zones, Southwest. Like I said, we have a lot of the zones already covered. We just have particular ones that are not. So.
Okay. All right, I warned you about this question in advance. Can you describe the concept of mutually assured destruction, known as MAD, to someone born after the fall of the Soviet Union?
Yes, I guess the best way to try to understand it is the concept itself, regardless of when one is around to understand it. It's the basic concept. The basic concept is that if you attack me, I can assure you that I can destroy you. Basically, I mean, that's what it is. It's like, okay, Russia, don't attack us because I can assure you that I will have enough weapons to destroy you. So it's a kind of deterrence, and it's a type of deterrence that says that you will be destroyed. So don't attack me because you're going to be destroyed.
Okay.
So that's basically what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So. When I worked at Los Alamos before coming here, I always would joke around with some of the missile people, say we really don't need these missiles because if we just set them off here on the ground, we're going to wipe everybody out anyway. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people have warned us about the dangers of things like nuclear winter. I think it was Carl Sagan was probably the first person to really jump all over that bandwagon. Is that a realistic possibility? Could we wipe out humanity?
So I missed the last part.
Could we wipe out humanity with a nuclear attack or a nuclear exchange?
Oh yeah, with a nuclear exchange, yes. Maybe one won't wipe out humanity, but a nuclear exchange can certainly do it. I mean, particularly
we have enough weapons to actually do ourselves in.
Oh yeah, between the U.S. and Russia, certainly.
Yeah,
certainly. More than once.
Yeah,
several times.
So recently, there's been a lot of discussions about battlefield use of nuclear weapons and developing small nuclear weapons. What's your thought on this? Is this a good idea? Should this be done?
I think it's a bad idea. One, because we don't need more nuclear weapons, period, regardless. And 2, it's just my understanding of it is it's a way to try to say we're not going to hit you with the big one, we'll just have a few little ones lop over, and maybe that'll change your mind. Maybe you won't do something if we just, we will deter you in the short term. So we'll just kind of throw this little one at you, and then maybe you'll say, okay, I won't do anything, rather than have a big one go over and destroy everything. I mean, to me, it's just another way to try to, one, make more weapons, for whatever reason, whether it's financial, somebody wants to make more money, or somebody wants to test their scientific skills. But to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me personally.
Is there a value in testing somebody's scientific skills?
Huh?
Is there a value in testing somebody's scientific skills?
Science by its very nature wants to test skills. I mean, that's why you do it. You want to learn. You want to find things out. I mean, I think science in its nature wants to be better at science. I don't know how much of that is a factor in this. I think it's a factor. I can't say it's the most important factor. But I mean, there's always things wrapped up in these kind of decisions, and there's usually money that's part of it somewhere. And then there's other. There could be a lot of reasons. Money, science. Somebody thinks that somehow we'll figure out how to get an even better hand at something. Maybe a lack of confidence in arms control and nonproliferation. Maybe lack of trust in the other party. Maybe just wanted to stick it to somebody. I mean, it could be any one of those. But either way, in my perception, I don't see why we need to do it.
So. Okay, I think that's very reasonable.
I'm sure there's reasons why people want to do it. It's just I personally don't see the value.
My take on it is the smaller you make a nuclear weapon, the more likely you are to use it, and the more likely it is to escalate into something you don't want.
Yeah, particularly when the platforms that they might be put on are the same platforms that have the big weapons. So you have to be able to. You have to find a way that the recipient can distinguish what you're sending is in fact a smaller weapon and not the big one. You got to think about, so you have to, or else it's not going to have that purpose that you want, because they still think it's the big.
I don't know how you could possibly do that.
Well, I'm not a scientist, but I don't either. Maybe the science can figure that out, but yeah. So.
Yeah, that still to me sounds like a very bad idea. You mentioned state actors. India, Pakistan. Is the Korean Peninsula the biggest risk area at the moment?
That's always a difficult question to say which is. I mean, it depends. Some people, depending on their own fears, will say it is. Some people will say it's Iran. Some people will say it's India, Pakistan. A lot depends on a person's. I mean, I don't know how much it is by numbers, because I don't know which one is really the riskier. It's all perception. It may be perception, and maybe the relationships that are going on at a particular time. I mean, at the time when we had President Trump and Kim Jong-un having their back and forth, that at that point people were thinking that that's the most dangerous place. I don't know if they think that right now, because it's not really, no one's really talking about it. So if India, Pakistan, for example, started something, then that would be the biggest risk. So a lot depends on what's happening in the geopolitical environment. It depends on if one particular country decides, I'm just going to start building up a lot more weapons. To say, North Korea decided tomorrow, I'm just going to make 35 more nuclear weapons. That would become a much more volatile area. So it depends.
Okay. This was we have a lot of students at Illinois Tech from both India and China. So I've synthesized this because I've got this question a few times. So I'm just going to say, what are India and China doing right now? Is this a dangerous area? where they're actually shooting each other? Is this really a hot war? Is this?
It's not one of those answers that I kind of just gave. It is when there's things happening. I mean, they've had their skirmishes before. We've had our skirmishes with North Korea before. India, Pakistan's had their skirmishes before. I think the thing to pull away from all of these is what happens afterwards. Has anything really changed in the relationship, in the dynamics of geopolitics afterwards? So was it just a skirmish? Was anything real? Did the needle move in any significant way afterwards that made the whole situation much more threatening? I mean, anytime you have a negative exchange like that, the needle is going to move a little bit, and sometimes it may move a lot of it. It depends on what happens afterwards. So with us in North Korea, the needle was moving, right? Now the needle has kind of gone back to where it was. Now, of course, in that time frame, North Korea tested more weapons, they tested more missiles, they tested more nuclear weapons in that time frame. They showed that their missiles can go further. They can fly over Japan. I mean, all the things happen. So the needle always moves a little bit. But I think a lot of it is, where are we now afterwards? Is it more threatening now than it was before?
Okay.
And I think that the jury's still out on that.
And how do we reset the needle, or how do we prevent these things?
Negotiation, exchange, diplomacy. And when you're not talking, you can't fix things. If you're not talking, things can stay static. Now, an event can happen. I mean, we've had COVID-19, right? So that slowed everything down, because now countries are focusing on internal issues. So a lot of these issues about nuclear were kind of, for the most part, we got other things we got to worry about. So an event can change things and adjust things. But normally, fortunately, COVID-19 is not a normal thing, but normally, it's about somebody saying, on some side, saying, let's make a change. Let's do something different. Are you willing to do something different? And it takes a situation that will create an environment for that to happen.
Is that more common now or less common? Are people more willing to talk?
It's less common right now, I think. I think we're just in a weird space right now. We're not doing a lot of talking even with our allies. So, I mean, not in the way we used to. Other countries, I don't know if it's less. I think we're missing an opportunity. I think that we should look at other ways that we can find avenues to communicate. I think that COVID-19, when you have an international threat, is an opportunity to come together and try to work things out, because there's a bigger thing going on. I don't think that we've taken advantage of that as much as we could have. So I would say not necessarily much better right now in terms of that environment, but it doesn't have to stay that way. That can change. Okay. It's all about people. There's nothing that can't. It's all about people, perceptions, personalities, the way people look at things, and we are ruled by the people who make the decisions and how they perceive things, and their own issues. And so, I may perceive something a certain way, but I'm not in a huge leadership position where I can make major geopolitical changes. So it's nothing. The only thing that can change is when people don't want to change, or they don't want to make things happen, for whatever reason. I mean, some things are just difficult, but some things are just, do you want to sit down and have a conversation? Do you want to do it? So.
All right. So I'm going to jump around because I have way too many questions here. So let me ask this one. How does one become a non-proliferation specialist?
Well, just getting more background on the field, in the field itself. I mean, I got into it totally by accident. And so I wasn't even aware of a lot of this work until I was in Washington as a fellow. And I was working I'm a lawyer, so I was working in the legal office of the Secretary of Defense. And I went to a meeting and they were talking about strategic weapons, and I fell in love with it. And I thought it was the greatest thing I ever heard of. And so that's how I got into this field. But a lot of people are aware of it before then. And they may get exposed to it at college, or their parents may be into it, or there's other ways. But if you'd like the field and you want to get into the field, there's a lot of organizations, not a ton, but there's organizations that work on these issues. You can join them. Go to now that with COVID-19 and Zoom, it's a lot easier to listen in on conversations that are going on. You don't have to be in Washington D.C. where a lot of these conversations have happen, or in other major cities. You can be anywhere and be a part of these conversations. Everything's on Zoom or Microsoft, so you can get much more involved in these areas and learn more and hear experts speak a lot more than you could before. So, join the Arms Control Association, go to the bulletin thing and see what they're doing. I mean, there's entities that are around that you can learn more and find out about internships and fellowships that way as well. So.
Okay, thanks. Can you send me a couple links that I can provide to students when you have a chance? So you mentioned the Arms Control Association.
Arms Association. Wow, there's a lot. There's Plowshares Fund. There's Bulletin. There's oh, my papers are flying away. There's
oh no.
Yeah, there's quite a few. But I can send you. I mean, relatively.
I'd appreciate that, so I can pass them along.
Sure.
And specifically, I know you're very interested in diversity and work very hard in this area. So one of the questions that I was asked were, are there groups that help women or people of color enter the field?
Pretty much the same ways, just finding out about those entities that have those conversations. Internships and fellowships are key. And like I said, now that everything's online, you don't have to find that, travel to DC and work in an NGO or anything like that anymore, or a research institution, academic institution. You can be anywhere and do an internship. And so, and I'll send you those names, and you can also look at those organizations for jobs and internships and fellowship. That's the best way to do it. Become a member. And a lot of them have student membership fees, so you can join easy. So if you're young, you can join these things as well. So
great.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed a significant change in diversity over your career?
Not in my field.
No. Okay.
Certainly not significant. What I have noticed now, I can say this with the organization that I have established. I have made it my goal to increase not just women of color and people of color in peace and security and national security issues, but particularly in my field, because my field is so overwhelmingly not people of color. And it has more women now, certainly more than when I started in the 90s. So the gender balance is getting much better. Not 50-50, but it's certainly much better. People of color is still a long way to go. My organization, we have a working group that's just focused on that. And so we definitely focus on bringing in more diverse voices into the field of nonproliferation, arms control, disarmament issues. So whereas for most of my life, I mean, literally, there was really no one besides me. In the policy side, there would be, maybe in the professional policy side, I was always, I can't say because it was a lot of years, so I'm not going to say I was always the only one, but I was, most of them I can remember, yeah, and I still am, at my level. I mean, but we're definitely trying to change that. Definitely want to change that and get more in the field and get more to stay in the field, because that's the other thing is to keep them in through mid-career, contributing as young, staying in, contributing mid-career, and then moving up the ranks. And so it's a challenge to keep people in the system all the way through. And that's true with a lot of these fields of national security and foreign policy.
How can we as a tech school help you with that?
Well, be engaged on these issues. We have people. If you want to contact us, we have people who can speak. Not just me, but others who can speak. There's younger people who can speak. If you wanted to have them just chat about it, we can help you. Like I said, I can help you figure out who's in the field. A lot of schools, unfortunately, are not. Though they don't have courses on arms control and nonproliferation, the disarmament, unfortunately. So that avenue is not always open to students. But like I said, there's organizations like mine, there's other organizations that are out there, there's NGOs. So, find a way to get involved by joining some of those.
Okay. Another question that we got was it very difficult to get a security clearance?
For me, it wasn't difficult. It was just tedious. The paperwork. Now, I filled out the paperwork in the days where, it's funny I say the days of it. It only recently became electronic. We're talking like my last security clearance was electronic. And that was not maybe like 7 years ago, something like that. 8 years ago, maybe. And maybe it was a little further back when it was, but not that long ago, you had to do it by hand. It's a long form. And as you probably know, you got to fill out all this information about everybody you knew and all the schools you went to. And no. And it wasn't, and I'm a kind of a boring person, so it wasn't so much difficult for me as much as just the tediousness. But what I will say is that this is an issue that people of color have been pointing out to the intelligence community and others who do background clearances, particularly for people of color who have family in many parts of the world, and so it takes a long time. They may say no because they don't want to, because they may say, oh, your parents are from that particular country. No, just off the bat. So we've been pointing this out, and I said my organization, other organizations have been making much more of a point to intel communities and also to entities like state or Department of Energy or others that are not in a DoD, that are not an intel building or office or department, but still have to go through background clearances. And so we're hoping that they're starting to listen to us and say that there needs to be a better way to help ensure that diverse voices do get those kind of jobs in government. So
now, I think that's very important. I always warn students, be very careful with marijuana. Just because marijuana is legal in some states, it's not legal federally, and that is one of the questions on these security clearance forms.
Yep.
And
it definitely is.
Do take that seriously. So it's an interesting problem. So let me just add, because the chat windows does get saved as in the recording. One of our faculty members, Professor Shapiro, has been putting in relative upcoming ongoing events related to nuclear security.
Oh, good.
Especially with regard to Korea. So I think that's very helpful, and I recommend that everybody looks at that. So with that, I know I apologize to all the students because I know you have to leave in a few minutes, and I'd like to give people an opportunity to ask questions in the chat window. So I'm going to say sorry to everybody who submitted a question that I didn't get to. It's not because we didn't think your questions were good. It just ran out of time. So if anybody has any extra questions in the chat window they'd like to ask, please go ahead, or you can unmute yourself to ask.
And people should also feel free to email me too if they want to touch base with me afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have your email, so I can pass that along to anybody who's interested.
I have a quick question actually for you.
Yes.
So I know you kind of covered this on how you got started into international security, but I'm personally very interested. But it's kind of harder for me to find opportunities. So sending the links would be really helpful. But how did you get started other than hearing it while you're a lawyer in Washington, D.C.?
For me, it started not so much in national security, but more in terms of public service and wanting to work for the government. So, I I I often say, like I just said, I think just kind of happen, but sometimes it also helps to put yourself in a position where something can happen and opportunities can present themselves. So I always want to work for the federal government. So I made a point of getting a fellowship that would get me into Washington, D.C. And then once I was there, I was open to what I wanted to do. And it just so happens that that was the thing that really caught my attention was that. But for many people, and who, particularly people of color who are not as exposed to these national security issues as others, and get into it like I did a little later. It's very important if you're interested, like you're interested now, which is great. Just to, if that's what you like to do, my organization, it exists. There's a lot of diverse people in my organization who work on national security, and many can provide. We have great mentorship programs, so they could talk to you about that. But really, it's like I said, there are certain organizations and certain NGOs that it's good to be in contact with and know about and join their events, because that's how you get in the field. That's how you get see who's in the field, attend events, read their products, go to the website. They got great information on the website. Everything is about the background knowledge and knowing the people. And so you can get the substance, and then and then if you want, I don't know what they have there, but if you want your own group of, develop your own system or organization of people, young people who want to talk about these issues, and produce some and have some of your own events like this one, where you're hearing from me, but have other events. These are ways to kind of reach out and get that knowledge and meet those people and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
And you can always check out my website at wcaps.org. You can reach me through that as well. So
I just have a quick question, if that's all right. I just wonder, how have things changed at the State Department since you left? Like, I mean, there's been, of course, some obvious changes, but like, have they completely redirected? Have they lost sight of whatever was your mission? Have they redefined it? And what do you think about that?
The mission is still there. The work is, it's definitely a lot more. It's not as prominent because President Obama was very committed to issues of nonproliferation and nuclear issues and things like that. His first speech in Prague was about nuclear disarmament and those issues. So it was a big issue, and so it was a lot more money and personnel to it. Now it's not as much. So the work still continues. The people are still there. The civil servants are still there. The foreign service is still there, at least in State Department. But it's not as prominent. It may not be getting as much money. The emphasis has changed because arms control has been going on since the 50s. Even before then, really. So the issue hasn't gone away. The recognition that it's in no one's interest for more countries to have nuclear weapons, I think that's pretty a bipartisan agreement. And it's also bipartisan that we don't want non-state actors getting their hands on this. So that's remained the same, but the emphasis has changed. And just one more thing, because I realize I got to go. One more thing is that I think that in terms of negotiations, I think there was a feeling that people who have expertise are not being utilized now. And I think, for example, if you look at what happened in North Korea and the summits, there were offices. It was done in a way that it was not really a whole of government approach. It was not really, let's look at all these experts who work in our government and put them behind this and really try to figure out how we're going to get North Korea to get rid of its nuclear weapons. It was pretty much run by the White House. And so there's a lot of expertise, like at State Department, that was not utilized. People who've been working on these issues for years. My whole bureau, which is nonproliferation, should have been there up front. The folks who work on the regional bureaus who work on Northeast Asia should have been there out front. And also same with DOE, Department of Energy, in the National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA. they do nuclear arms control. That's what they do. That's because they're, they have the weapons, and the labs are controlling all the weapons. So they're very integral to this part. And there's other offices that could have been brought in, but we didn't take a whole of government approach. And so we didn't take advantage of all the knowledge that's been built up for years on dealing with this. And so that's felt at state, and that's felt at other places as well.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Greatly
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Sorry I had to leave early, but this has been great.
Already. So
Yeah,
thank you.
anyone
so
can
much for
contact me
coming.
if you want to.
Thank
Will
you
do.
very much.
So I'd like to ask
Thanks.
everybody else to stick around for a second, but thank you for coming.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen for a second. Oh, you can go. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
So hopefully everybody can see my screen for next week. So next week's speaker is Professor Elijah Anderson from Yale University. And he has requested that we do some readings. So you can see the readings up here. He would like everybody to read the articles, Black Americans are asserting their rights in white spaces. That's when whites call 911. It's a link to vox.com. Then he's also got the white space, which is linked to at sociology.yale.edu. And I always recommend that people read his first book, A Place on the Corner. And for all the students out there watching, I would greatly appreciate it if you could submit potential questions to me by Monday at noon so I can collate them and put them together. So let me leave this up there for another second so everybody can see it in the video, although I guess everybody can pause the video. But this should also be another very interesting talk on challenging subjects next week.
Will that be a presentation, or is it the same Q&A format?
That one will be more of a Q&A format.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Jeff, can you
basically
Sorry.
letting the speakers choose the format they prefer for the most part. So some like to have a little bit of a presentation and then Q&A, some want Q&A, some just want to talk. So to me, it's fine with whatever anybody wants to do. I figured since we're getting them to volunteer their time, we'll figure out how to accommodate them.
Jeff,
Yes.